All right, welcome back to Problem Solver Politics. I am your host, Cardin Ellis, with Cody the Oracle.
Hey, everyone.
And today we also have a very special guest with us who is Skyped in. We're going to do an interview with Mr. Scott Santens.
Hey, everyone.
Scott, how you doing today, man?
Good, how are you?
Oh, I can't complain. Hey, we're really excited to interview you. I have been, just to let you know, I've been shamelessly ripping off various articles and publications that you have written that are very knowledgeable, so that I could just look more knowledgeable to my friends. So
I know, that's great. That's what they're out there for.
yeah, it seemed to have worked. So thank you. It is all just a facade here at Problem Solver Politics. We're ripping off a lot of Scott Santens stuff. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, that's all of societies. We're all ripping each other off.
So anyway, I've thought a lot this week about questions I was going to ask Scott Santens. Obviously, for those of you that aren't familiar with Scott Santens, he's basically one of the predominant voices about UBI, kind of one of the thought leaders, I guess you could call it, on the subject, and is a prolific publisher on the subject online. And I've seen a lot of interviews, so I didn't want to just jump into the basics of you and your bio and, what frustrates you about a world that doesn't understand UBI yet, But I couldn't help but think one thing. In all of your interviews and in all of your appearances and you're talking with people about universal basic income, what is the question that's not getting asked? Like, if there was one thing that you feel like is always omitted from a conversation about how UBI would help or hinder, like, what would be that thing that you just feel like you're necessarily not getting across that you wish people could get across?
Well, I guess that it's really comes down to like really fundamental stuff, because it requires diving in and looking at all this and thinking about it for a while. And really, it's only then that you can start to get at the deeper issues. So that's really the issue for me, is that there's just so many people that aren't really thinking about this in a deep enough way yet. And that's totally understandable, because they just haven't reached that point yet. But if we're just going to skip ahead to the advanced class or something,
Yeah.
then it's about like what is money itself? What is it that we're doing through an economic system? Like, what is it? This exchange of like pieces of paper, like what is that, and how does that work? What's the function? And I think that one way of looking at this, I wrote about this in an article called "Think Like a Martian."
Okay.
And so, like, thinking about like the way human society works from like the perspective of like an extraterrestrial, like what everything doesn't make any sense, and they're trying to get a hold of this. So really, I think that basic income can be seen as essentially trust. It's an unconditional trust in society, where instead of right now, we trust each other if we have these pieces of paper. So like, you can go up to a complete stranger and you can give them this piece of paper or slide a piece of plastic, and they'll give you stuff that they put like work into. So you can get food, you can get all these things that have been manufactured. And this happens because like essentially people are trusting you, and they trust that they can use what you just used well in exchange for what they want.
Okay.
So what we're doing with basic income is saying we unconditionally trust you. We want to make sure that without any other like misconceptions or preconceptions, that everyone has at least a minimum amount of access to our basics, to what society is producing.
Okay, now I'm curious. What were any of your reservations when you first heard about UBI? Because it's kind of interesting. As I've studied this, it seems like there was a lot of talk and a lot of writing about it in the 60s, obviously during, the Milton Friedman era and, the family assistance program in 1972 that Richard Nixon was considering, the Senate had voted on, not the Senate, sorry, the House of Representatives had voted on, and so on and so forth. And then there was kind of like this lull, it seems, in academia, where it wasn't just like considered or talked about as much. But then as Elon Musk stuff started getting really cool, technology started getting really cool in the early 2000s, I just noticed a smattering and an increase on the subject. And then obviously enter Andrew Yang, and it's the topic du jour. When you first heard about UBI, did you have any kind of these reservations that people have about it that you had to overcome? And if so, how did you overcome it? Like, what was your kind of not spiritual journey, but like what was your thought process towards adopting and then now becoming like one of the principal advocates of UBI?
Right. So I guess I wouldn't say I don't know. I wouldn't say reservations. I would say that I'm curious. I have a very curious mind. So when I find something new, I really want to explore that. And so I try to avoid making preconceptions. I try to avoid assuming how things work. It's just like, all right, so what's this idea is to provide people money. What is the evidence for that? And I'm going to explore it. So it wasn't so much that I thought a bunch of weird things and then they were falsified or something through my research. It was really just about being extremely curious and wanting to explore this topic. And yeah, it's part of it was very interesting to me was exactly how you described, where I had no idea that Nixon had proposed a version of this, had that 1,000 economists had signed on to an income guarantee as being a good idea. I had no idea about the experiments that took place in various cities across the country in the 70s, even in Seattle and Denver, and none of this stuff I knew. It was just this kind of new history that I was learning.
Okay.
And I wasn't aware of the stuff, the experiments in the Namibia or India or any of this. So I was just really eating up all of this evidence, this scientific experimental stuff that was out there.
Well, I love that you segue perfectly into my next question. Is you use the word evidence, okay? And UBI has been this kind of interesting thing to advocate for and to talk to people about because there's not some overwhelming canon of undisputable evidence. And also it's difficult to provide measurable quantifiers for, quote, UBI because the culture in Finland may be completely different than the culture in America, may be completely different than the culture in, I keep botching the pronunciation, Namibia.
Namibia?
Yeah, Namibia. There's something about an N and an M in one word that I just can't do it. But anyway, what evidence really, because it's kind of like, I feel like when I'm talking to these people, I say, well, we've got the Alaskan pipeline and we've got these test cities in Denver, but these are all much smaller scale things than an entire nation doing it. And then the data coming out of Finland, where basically an entire nation tried to do it, is a lot more dubious. But then again, Finnish culture and work ethic and age demography is completely different than the United States of America. So it's literally not even comparing apples to oranges. It's like comparing apples to grapefruits, So what evidences of the success of UBI have you sold enough that you would basically dedicate your life/career to it? Like, what evidence is the most compelling in your mind for UBI?
Well, for me, it's just a mass collection of evidence. So it's more like a puzzle that I put together. So you get a piece here and a piece there and a piece there. You put it all together, and it creates a very clear picture. And if you only look at a couple pieces, it does not seem like a clear picture. You might even look like a picture at all. You're just like, well, that's nice. That's nice, finding. But if you just see this stuff over and over and over and over and over again, and it's always like the same stuff, then suddenly it becomes like a clearer picture of, again, it's human behavior. This is like, again, if you look at this from a Martian perspective, and you're seeing that when humans have economic security, that they do this, then you look at economies differently. You understand that people are going to behave in a certain way because that's how people behave. It's not like people in Namibia are extremely industrious, so that if you provide them with a universal basic income, then they, you see a 301% self-employment boost. Because apparently there's something really weird going on in Namibia where these people are really entrepreneur oriented, and then in the U.S. we're not. But it doesn't make any sense. We see this over and over again, that if you provide people with this income base, and it's not only the money that you're giving, it's the way that you're doing it. So this is a monthly stable thing that that's going to be there. And the fact that when you provide this to everyone within a community, then you're not just injecting capital to enable someone to start a business, you're injecting consumer demand and the ability to actually signal what demands are in those markets in a way that doesn't exist without it. So many businesses fail not because these businesses are offering an inferior product or service, but because they just might not have enough customers that can buy their product or service.
Okay, awesome. Now, how do you overcome people's doubts about UBI? I mean, I talk to a lot of people about universal basic income, usually because they're interested in why I'm following Andrew Yang, because there's a massive shift. Because all of a sudden 90% of our content is dedicated to Andrew Yang when I'm pretty well-known conservative in my town. I
Yeah.
actually held appointed Republican office. You know what I'm saying? Yet here I am embracing UBI, which many people perceive as like this wild progressive leftist thing, when I'm actually like, no, there was libertarians that thought it up first in the 60s, and believe it or not, it's not socialism, it's capitalism that starts at zero. And it seems like all the time when you talk to people, you've got that 1000, 1003 to come up with some kind of soundbite that assuages them. You haven't gone off the deep end and want to nationalize the American economy. What do you notice? You don't have to have exactly a top three, but like, what are the top doubts that you found people have when you talk with these hundreds of people I'm sure you talk with? And then how do you overcome those doubts when basically pitching or advocating on behalf of UBI?
Yeah, so I like to say that basic income is not left or right; it's forward, and it's important to see that we have become so tribalistic that what you said is true not only for those on the right but also those on the left. So you've got people on the right who are saying, "Oh, this is crazy socialism. This is like a communistic Trojan horse," and then on the left you've got people saying, "Oh, this is saving capitalism, and this is a capitalistic like Trojan horse." Like both sides claiming that UBI is good for the other side and not them. And of course that's silly. You've got support on both sides as well as detractors on both sides. So it's one of those really interesting ideas that just cuts across the entire spectrum, because again it's more like a humanity thing. It's a human thing and not so much a politicized thing. And so the three that I hear the most are definitely, oh, well, that's a silly idea. That's just going to cause inflation, and then there is not going to be any value to it, which is, I just think, a really interesting assumption that everybody makes. I think that says something about us, and again, what we think about money and what we don't know about money. That shows a lot. Another one is work. So, oh, everyone's going to stop working if they have unconditional basic income, because why would you work if you don't have to? Which again is weird, because that question itself kind of assumes that wage slavery is necessary, that you actually have to withhold income for people in order for anybody to do anything.
Well, also it's
And
only
then
a
if you do
thousand.
it, then reward it.
Well, also it's only $1,000, and I mean $1,000 a month is not going to be able to make me stop working here in California. I mean, especially not when you have like a $3,000 mortgage, excuse me, for a shack. Maybe we could pull that off in Tennessee, but anyway, keep going.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the amount too. So some people will say, "Oh, it's too low," and the other people will say it's too high. It's there's just so much variety in these numbers, and of course, by location too. Obviously, in the U.S., a basic income is going to be a lot different than, say, basic income in Namibia or India. These things. So there's a lot of variety, but the most important element again is just you have to unconditionally provide an amount of income to people, and if they know that it's regular and they know it's stable, then it has these effects. And the people thinking that it has to be a certain amount in order to do anything, that's false too. Like, any amount is better than zero. So like you said, this is capitalism doesn't start at zero. So if we have capitalism that starts at $5 a month, like, it seems like it's nothing, but for some people, $5 a month is actually quite a bit elsewhere in the world. In the U.S., it may not be, but as that number goes up, then there's a lot more power to that because of the unconditionality. Like if you have $1,000 a month, like that may seem in the U.S. to be very small. Like you said, if your mortgage is $3,000 per month, but if you're three people living together in a house with a $3,000 mortgage, then that covers the mortgage. You can arrange your life in a way that enables you to make new decisions and new choices. And that's a really important element about this too, is that right now we're prevented from a lot of choices that we would want to make because we don't have those choices. And so this is Freedom Dividend is a great name because it's providing people the freedom to make more choices. They can choose to live with $1,000 a month. They can choose to combine that with other people. They can choose to not work if they choose, at least in the traditional labor market. But that can be good too. Like if people are pursuing unpaid work and volunteering, if they're creating businesses that could take years or something to create, startups take time. People need money in order to pursue these pursuits. So it's really offering people a lot more choice. So the third thing that I hear a lot, so you got inflation, you got work. I guess the third most common is thinking about immigration fears. They're saying, oh, if you provide people money, then all of a sudden you're going to be like creating a magnet, and then all these immigrants are going to like swarm in to wherever you did that, and then it'll deflate to zero because at least to a much smaller amount because you're spreading out this income among a much larger population. And of course, all the rest of the other fears related to immigration are part of that too. And so for that one, the main kind of response there is that we can actually essentially incentivize legal immigration through a basic income, because if only citizens receive it, then suddenly it makes a lot more sense to actually pursue a legal immigration route because you want to receive that. And we can make it so that, right now to become a citizen of the United States, it could be like a 10-year process. Like it takes a while and it's expensive too. People are actually paying money, a lot of money, in order to prove
generally
that
takes
they
at
can be
least
citizens.
it generally takes at least $10,000 to $20,000 and 10 years. That's if you are on top of it. And there's families that I've been writing letters for that we work for and have been working intimately with everybody, every immigration department in the U.S. government. And it is absurd how long it takes for some people while how short it takes for others. I can't hear myself.
Okay. Well, real quickly, though, there's also a question I wanted to bring up along these lines. Oh, a little cut off here. But I was really curious. So you're obviously, Scott, you're a big Alex Yang. I'm Andrew Yang fan, Alex Yang. I see you're wearing the math hat. What's curious to me, though, is I wonder, because, we went to Yang first, and he kind of introduced UBI to us, and we've grown from them. But I wonder, someone more kind of just in the know in the community, are there any kind of ideological divides in the UBI community where someone would support UBI but say, I can't get behind Andrew's freedom dividend. I want UBI, but I have some other different implementations I want where they wouldn't be a big Andrew Yang fan. Because like I said, we went from Yang to UBI, and I believe you knew about UBI and then worked with Andrew. But I wonder, anyone who's like, I'm a big UBI supporter, but there's something about his plan I can't get behind. Would you ever see something like that happening?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There are definitely people who say they support UBI who do not support Andrew Yang. And I couldn't put a number on that, what percentage of people that is. Some people, like myself, are very excited about the ability to even get basic income out into the wild in a way that it did not exist before. And so here we are discussing this idea, and a lot of us have been pushing for years to get people to discuss this idea. So to me, it's actually very odd and disappointing to see someone who, let's say they have been pushing for basic income for 20 years, and now Yang is running, and they're like, I don't like that version because it's not this, and this, and it's not doing this. And that to me doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense strategically. It doesn't make sense even just as a supporter, I feel, of basic income. And some of that is through misinformation, and maybe it's even people who want to support somebody else. Like maybe you're really invested in Bernie Sanders, and he seemed to be more and more interested in basic income, and then all of a sudden he reverses, and now he's like, no, job guarantee is a much better alternative to basic income, and we should do this. So then suddenly these people who are very invested in Bernie are more apt to say, oh, well, yeah, I don't like Yang's basic income. I still want Bernie to take this up, but if Bernie's not going to do that, I still got to go with Bernie because this, and this. And then, oh, I don't want Yang's version because it's not stacking with all of the welfare state, that we can't get rid of anything at all, that everything needs to exist on top of a basic income, and anything less than that is bad. Or a similar argument to even what killed Nixon's family assistance program in the 70s. It was, oh, well, it's not high enough. Like $1,000 per month is nothing. This is chump change. If I get $1,000 per month, then that I can be worse off because like that's so small. Like employers will actually lower their wages, and the effect that I'm seeking will not happen unless it reaches this magical number, and that magical number is say $2,000 a month, or maybe it's $3,000 a month, and then all of a sudden basic income is a good idea. But if basic income is a bad idea, if it's $1,000 a month, and people can actually convince themselves of this. And in Nixon's time, it was the same kind of thing. Democrats didn't want to push it through the Senate because it wasn't enough for some of those Democrats, and there were those among the Republicans as well that didn't want to push it through. But on the Democratic side, a lot of it was they just felt it wasn't high enough.
Wow. So what's your perfect UBI? In the Scott Santens world, where it's not Andrew Yang's freedom dividend, what would you consider the prescription for American society on a UBI?
Yeah, so the amount of the income is the least important part. And I say that as someone who has a crowdfunded basic income, and I say this as someone who has researched and studied especially what other people who have received a basic income has said is the most important element. And what everyone seems to say, and what I say as well, is that the unconditionality is the most important part. So if we're going to pass a basic income, that's the most important part. It needs to be absolutely, you cannot lose it. It's non-withdrawable. There is no work requirement at all. You can choose to do anything you want to. You will still receive it. And of course, you can spend it on anything because it's cash. That's the really important part. So the amount is less important. I would be absolutely happy with starting with an unconditional basic income floor of even $200 per month. Like that's a very small amount, and we could even do that through say like a high carbon dividend or something. But that's something that's better than nothing, and it really through the process of crowdfunding my own basic income, I really started to feel like this greater feeling of security at around a few $100s per month. I think that I felt that because we need a certain amount for food, and that's kind of like a major need of ours, is knowing that we'll be able to eat. So knowing that next month that I was for sure going to have at least $250, that seems like a small amount of money to a lot of people out there. But if you know that you're not going to starve ever, then that makes a huge difference. It's an emotional feeling. It's hard to describe because I didn't even know what it felt like until I felt it. Like as an academic kind of perspective, you can read about how important economic security is and how damaging insecurity is. But until you feel security, it's like you had no idea what it was like until you feel that. Insecurity is so rampant, it's so normal that it's like a strange concept to people to feel secure. So that's what I want to start at, is just make sure that everyone receives an unconditional amount, that's some amount on a regular monthly basis for the rest of their lives. And that's just a huge win in my book.
It's so interesting that you say that, because similar to you, one of my biggest attractions to UBI, and especially the freedom dividend, as emphasized by Andrew Yang, is actually a spiritual attraction. And it's kind of interesting. I haven't really felt the way I feel talking about UBI since I was literally a Mormon missionary serving in Argentina, because the nature of the conversation changes and it shifts a little bit. And so it's pretty well known on my show. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Okay. And oftentimes there's lots of stereotypes out there. People, they all have like a Mormon friend, but they don't really know about Mormonism other than like, oh, I saw the musical, you know what I'm saying? And so, it's hilarious, but I tell people when they ask me, because it fascinates some people, like, oh, you still go to church? That's crazy, And they'll say, why? And one of the things I say is, I like how it reformats my brain every Sunday. And it reminds me that my worth is inherent and is unconditional. People don't realize this, but besides propagating the Book of Mormon, the church actually has a couple of really big notches in its belt. The most commonly translated and propagated song in the world is the Sunday school song sung by children at church called I Am a Child of God. And it's basically just, a song that talks about how God just loves me unconditionally, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what an amazing feat to have pulled off. The biggest message this church has spread, okay, isn't fear, isn't hatred, isn't guilt, isn't anything, but this idea that you are unconditionally loved by your Father in heaven, right? And so what's interesting is I actually find sometimes it's almost easier to convert conservatives and Christians to this idea because there's almost a spiritual angle, this idea that don't we all just have an inherent value to us? And something magical happens when you are de-stressed. Just like you say, there's this inherent stress that we feel as humans for food. And even when it was just that $250, you thought, okay, well, at least like food is covered. And until you feel the security, you don't know what it's like. It's kind of like love. You know what I'm saying? Until you actually feel it and you fall in love, you don't know what it feels like, right? So it is strange. It's almost like evangelizing when trying to talk about a very physical dollars and cents thing, this UBI. But I've noticed that it's almost the spiritual arguments that carry more weight with people. And I'm curious, since obviously maybe in the social circle that I'm dealing with people here, at least in political talk, it might be predominated by conservatives, especially like, Christian ones with, kind of open hearts, big minds, or big hearts, open minds, whatever you want to call it. Who do you find are the most receptive to the UBI argument, and who do you find are the most against it? You know what I'm saying? Do you find that some people are just early adopters of this, where they just get it early, and if so, why?
Yeah, so I would say, again, the unconditionality is such an important part. And so when you talk about love, this is very intertwined with trust too, and the way it's like social cohesion and the way that societies work. And right now, like, Jesus did not apply means testing to his healing. He didn't say, well, I'm going to cure you of this, but first of all, can I see your green card? Can I see that you have a pay stub? And can you find for me in so I can record in triplicate? Yeah. Jesus did not do that. It was about unconditional. It was about unconditionality, and so we have a system. We have a society that's built on distrust. That's just the default setting. And so if you think about that from these terms, like religion kind of created this ability to trust each other that didn't exist before religion existed. That was a way that people could feel that they were part of the same tribe that carried across very large regions. Worldwide, you could suddenly be part of the same tribe if you all believed part of the same religion. And so that's then that kind of just religion itself is this ability for people to trust each other and to love each other, to just give everyone the benefit of the doubt without further testing or whatever first. So that's a big step forward. So I guess the biggest kind of detraction, the biggest kind of mindset that blocks this is born out of this distrust. It's an emergent factor of the society built of distrust, and it's about distrusting how people use it. And so the big fear is that people, and that goes to your basics, like the grasshopper and the ants kind of thing, where don't want to do all this stuff, and these other people not do anything, because then I feel that they're going to be benefiting off of me, and they're not going to do anything. So there's that distrust. And it's interesting too, because you can see this if you ask, say, a group of people, just ask like in a room sometime and say, hey, would you stop working if you were provided a basic income of $1,000 per month? And it's say hardly anyone would raise their hands. Yeah. 8 out of 10 people are going to say they're going to keep on working. 9 could be till 10. Like most people, overwhelmingly, they want to do stuff, and they've got all sorts of ideas of what they want to do, and they can even be blocked from doing that by a lack of income. And then
and also, I don't want to interrupt you, but the only demographic I remember seeing that would consider stop working in some of these studies I've read are actually demographics we kind of support the idea of them stopping working. Like I remember single mothers in the Denver study were the only group that actually went down in the amount of hours they decided to work because their experimental UBI was actually compensating for some income. But there were some great stories that came out of it. Like they're able to spend more time with their kids, and instead of working an extra shift, they went to school, became a forensic, forensic criminologist, and then ended up working for the sheriff's department, and were able to provide a much, 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 much better income and life for their children than they could have ever on their own without that UBI. So
yeah, and so notice too that when you the words that you just used, I think that a lot of the problems are based out of our language and the way that we kind of mix concepts together. And so like this idea that mothers stop working in order to be mothers, at home, like that's kind of silly, right? Because of course they're not stopping working; they're shifting the work from one kind of work to another kind of work. It's just another job. We don't recognize it that way because we don't recognize unpaid work as work. And so I try to break that apart. Like I have like a Venn diagram that I've made a few times out there where there's, imagine 3 circles, and there's jobs, and then there's work, and then there's meaning. And these are all kind of 3 different things that we tie up together when we talk about work. Like there's this assumption that if you have a job, then that's work is false, and that it's meaningful is absolutely false. And you can absolutely work that's not a job, and you can have work that's not meaningful, or it can be meaningful. And you can seek meaning in a way that isn't involving jobs or work. But all these things can be important to us, and I think what people are striving for is to find purpose in their lives. And purpose is something that requires really income in order to achieve that, because we live in a system that excludes people from what they need, from access to resources, unless they have income in exchange for it. So like this foundation of basic income actually enables all of this work, paid and unpaid, that is extremely valuable to us. And we can actually better choose to do this kind of work, both paid and unpaid, that's valuable to us, instead of all these like David Graeber bullshit jobs, all these forms of employment that people find entirely meaningless, and they're even wondering what's the point of it all, but they need the paycheck, so they keep doing it.
Yeah, it's one of my biggest excitements for the concept of UBI, like I said before, is almost a spiritual one. I look at this and I just think, it's so interesting. Elon Musk said, I don't think this is going to be something we want. It's going to be an inevitability. Okay, we're going to have to do it, but then we're going to have to focus on the deeper questions. I'm almost excited for UBI because I think, man, yes, it needs purpose and he needs meaning. And there's these deeper existential questions that he has. And our society is just stressed out. We're just economically stressed out right now. So we're at each other's throats and we're tearing each other apart. And you're right. The social fabric of religion definitely does help because it provides some unconditionality in people's lives. But I view UBI as being something that could even augment that more. And who knows, maybe we can go back to loving each other, and actually start addressing some of these deeper existential questions that were kind of not answered by work previously, but definitely assuaged, shall we say, by a full-time job. And I look at it and I think that's going to be one of the biggest steps forward, where we can actually start looking at the deeper question, like, what is the nature of man? Like, what is your purpose here on earth? And who knows? Maybe it will yield this great spiritual rebirth in America. You know what I'm saying? Where we actually go back to liking each other. Now, my timer's going off here. I know we told you we do 30 minutes. So, Cody, I think, had one question here before we jam.
Well, I just wanted to mention one thing, because you do a lot of great work when it comes to UBI and getting the word out there. But something else you just got, and a lot of people that watch, they know this. You keep track whenever the media likes to screw with Andrew Yang and pull nonsense on him. So I don't know if you can see. I just put it on the screen right now that you tweeted out this morning that CNN took, I guess, just 6 random people from the poll, because they skipped from Andrew Yang, and then they skipped like 3 or 4 people and went and pulled Beto O'Rourke. I thought it was funny. Actually, Fair Media Watch replied and said, CNN, if you're going to post polling results for 6 candidates, why list the top 5 and then someone who's in an 8-way tie for 7th? But I just thought I want to bring that up because I want to make sure people see name to face who does it. But I want to also ask you on this. Has this been? We saw an interview with Andrew, I believe, with another YouTube channel, Nerds for Yang, where he brought up and he said, I didn't realize until like I started doing this, the media does this to people. Is this same thing for you, where you kind of just like hadn't looked this closely, and now following the campaign, you look and they're just like, oh no, wait, they do just do stuff like this, just leave you out of graphics, don't mention you, put people ahead of you that aren't. Is this the first time you kind of noticed that as well?
Well, okay, so I've been a long time independent, and I try to keep like kind of a scientific, skeptical mind. I try not to fall for tribal ideologies, and so
it's a lot more fun. You should try it sometime.
So years ago, I started being very hesitant about the way that our media was going, and so I noticed that you got Fox News first, and that was obviously pushing a right agenda. And then MSNBC responded by pushing this left agenda. And it just felt like before my eyes, like there was a really a partisan transformation of our media outlets. And I didn't like that. And I found that I had to spend more time trying to find, what is accurate, what's the truth. You've got to apply a lot more critical thinking nowadays than we did before. And we're losing trust in our institutions, and they're not helping. And so when Trump says, fake news, he started screaming that and saying that all the time. On the one hand, it's partially true. He likes to say stuff that he conflates these things, and like something will be fake news that's entirely true just because he doesn't like that news. But then also there can be these distortions and manipulations in the media. And so sure enough, like we saw this last time around. We saw this with Bernie and Hillary. We saw a lot of it there, even on both sides, and now here we are again. And it's just, I hate it. It's so disappointing to me, because not only I dislike the lying to people through error, through omission, or through this blatant manipulation, but I hate that it just further erodes trust in these institutions and each other. So it's harder to figure out what to trust if the people that you did trust lie to you. And this is something that, like, to me personally, this goes like all the way back to when I found out about like Santa Claus wasn't real. Like, spoiler alert. But that really got to me, that I like trusted my parents, and it turned out that this whole thing was a lie. And then that actually got me thinking about, well, wait a second, what about this Jesus stuff? Is that false too? And
oh no, you had a faith crisis over Santa Claus. Okay.
Right, it goes into all this stuff. So I hate that trust in each other is eroding through these. So on the one hand, like I have to point this stuff out, and people say, oh, we should focus on something else. But I can't. I don't want to erode trust in institutions, but I gotta point this stuff out, because people need to know, and they have to be able to know that critical thinking is even more important, and they've got to try to figure out what's accurate and what isn't. And I hate that that's the case, but it needs to be. And I also think that when it comes to Andrew Yang, I've got to leverage the Barbra Streisand effect. Like, if these institutions are going to leave out Yang, then they can backfire on them by making sure that obvious leaving him out is something that is its own story, and then that gets the story, and then suddenly more people are talking about Yang than they would have otherwise. And so I'm, on the one hand, this works great. Like, go ahead, keep leaving out yang because people are really talking about the fact you're leaving out yang.
Well, and it's so interesting you say this because I will be tribalistic for the next 30 seconds. One of the biggest things. Give me a second. One of the biggest things I really enjoy about following Andrew Yang and talking about his candidacy is the eye-opening experience it is for a lot of my progressive and Democrat friends. Because conservatives for years have been saying, hey, dude, we are getting misrepresented so badly here that it's beyond an error of omission. This is a sin of commission. Like, they are actively persecuting us. The fourth branch of government, the media that we're supposed to trust, is actively fanboying for this side and then working against us so badly that even George Bush, who is not the most articulate guy, George Bush Jr., but even he had an acting policy that he would only do live interviews the last 2 years of his presidency because the media manipulation and the way they would chop up and edit and even manipulate the sound to make it sound like he had a worse drawl than he really did and everything. We worked in radio during those times, and he would not come on the radio unless it was a live interview because the White House had gotten so fearful of how he was just getting absolutely butchered, you know what I'm saying, in the media. Yeah. And so I love covering Andrew Yang because now I'm like, when all of a sudden the Yang's like, wait, they shut off his mic. Oh, wait, they left him out of the graphic. Oh, wait, they cut to Bernie Sanders because he's popular. I'm like, see, we weren't kidding. We've been saying this for 40 years.
Yeah, I guess it's not partisan related, it's media related. They'll do it to anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so this is like a media ecosystem issue, and it's like an evolution. Like, I love too how like each president can set like new precedents as president through the way that they utilize the new generations of media. And I think that the Andrew Yang is part of this transformation from this traditional media ecosystem to this long form independent podcast kind of content. And another exciting aspect of this to me is, again, if we're going to have half as much work to do thanks to automation in the next 20 years, then that does not mean that we're all going to be twice as employed as we are now. We could actually work half as much. And if we redefine full-time to be 20 hours a week, and everybody is full-time employed at 20 hours a week, imagine how much more time that is to spend with each other in our communities, to read, to consume this podcast content, to actually think more and have more space, and to have this burden, this tax this cognitive burden that is created by economic insecurity. Like, just this it can be just a hugely transformational thing. And so that's why I push so hard for this, because I want to reach the Star Trek future, and I think that we absolutely can do that. And Yang is pivotal in hoping to get us there.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that I look forward to, because especially as a parent, I don't know, do you have children, Scott? You look responsible.
I did not.
Oh, you don't? Oh, man, you could totally be a dad in a park. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, we'll hook you up if we got any friends. We'll hook you up, bro. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway,
well, I'm engaged.
Oh, rock on. Congratulations, brother. Congratulations. As a parent, I look into the amount of time that it really does take to properly raise a child is insane. And we have to actually delegate out a lot of this jobs. Why? Because we're working full time. We have to make this 8-hour school that matches the 8-hour work week, when all of the science shows, especially my kindergarten and first grade age child, just doesn't have the attention span for that. If we're honest with ourselves, it's government subsidized babysitting half the time. Why? Because all the studies show that, attention span, learning curve, so on and so forth, is only a certain amount of time. In fact, a lot of studies have proven also that the average 8-hour day is not very successful those last 2 hours. That human beings were kind of meant to work and focus on something for 5 to 6 hours at a time. And our peak efficacy is actually 5 or 6 hours at a time. And we only have this traditional 40-hour work week because Henry Ford had actually figured out that, if I give 2 days in a row off, Sunday and Saturday, then my guys actually get productive in this 8-hour, 40-hour work week. All right. However, ask nurses, ask firemen, ask people that entrepreneurs that work all kinds of different schedules, and the 40-hour work week for most people, I would actually dare say, is not the ideal. And science has actually shown us that, we actually, if we just work harder and smarter, in less time, we can get more done and then have more time that we need to dedicate towards our child that might have an opioid addiction in his teens, or our child that has a learning disability that needs extra time with his mother learning how to read and going over his math homework with his father, and so on and so forth. So my biggest excitement over UBI is our ability to spend time with our kids and raise decent human beings again, because we're not stressed out of our minds about it. Now, we've totally gone over. Oh my goodness gracious, I've gone 15 minutes over. Do you have another 5 minutes, or you got to jam somewhere?
I got another 5 minutes. I got a thing at 12 at the hour. But
okay, well, we're going to 12. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally just kidding, dude. I believe Cody had just one or two more questions for you here that we had pulled up. Cody.
Hey, well, just one thing I want to make sure we get to, let people know all the great stuff you're working on. And I believe we got to pull it up correctly. Yes, so it looks like, as you said, after 5 years, you decided to leave Medium, where you did a lot of self-published writings. I just thought it interesting, really quickly, if you wouldn't mind just letting people know exactly what happened and where you're going, man.
Yeah, so Medium, again, it's like part of this media ecosystem evolution transformation kind of stuff, where I loved Medium when I first got on it. Like, here was this ability to write like nice looking long form essays. Like, I could publish my own articles. I could make them look as good as something that could be published on the Atlantic or something. Like, it looked nice, and I could reach a lot of people. And I loved they built in like a self-discovery engine into the system, so that people could recommend it, and then if enough people recommended it, then it went out to more people, and so it amplified my voice. Instead of reaching a few hundred or a few thousand people, I could reach hundreds of thousands of people by writing on Medium. So I thought it was great. And then they started, making these changes along the way, where we're going to change the way that the recommendation engine works. We're going to put up a paywall, and you need to put up your stuff behind the paywall in order to be curated. And the final straw for me was, you can't have a Patreon link in your articles, or else they will not be curated. Like, that is a violation of their new terms of service for being curated. And that's just ridiculous to me, to actually essentially kind of coerce writers into writing for their paywall. And that is economic insecurity. For writers need this monthly dependable amount in order to focus on their writing. And again, it's a quality versus quantity issue as well. And this goes to clickbait and what people are writing about. And if you can have a lot more quality, kind of really well thought out things that people are creating because they're passionate about, if they have like a subscriber kind of basis where they know what they're getting on a monthly basis. But if they don't know, and it all depends on how much advertising revenue they can get, how many clicks that they can get, then they're going to be gaming the algorithm. You're going to figure out, okay, what can I do, and how often do I need to do it in order to get these clicks and to get people, to get this revenue. So that just it's fed up with me with Medium. I said, all right, no more Medium. I got to find something new. But then it's also part of this evolution is saying that as we go into this new kind of ecosystem, it's like we all have to be our own platforms, because then we can't be deplatformed. If you build up like a massive audience on something like YouTube, and then you get kicked off of it, or maybe something happens and YouTube no longer exists, or for whatever reason, and you are deplatformed, then suddenly you lose out. You've like kind of lost your voice with all these people. So what I'm trying to do now with ScottSantens.news, I started up like a Scott Santens news flash where people can follow me and get email alerts to whenever I do like an article or a podcast or something. And so then I can post anywhere I want to, and I'm no longer reliant on any of those places. I'm creating me as a platform, and people will follow just me around, and because they're interested in what I'm doing. And I think that's kind of where we're going in the future is if we're going to be independent, if we're going to really do fully independent media, you have to be independent. And aside from a basic income, to really enable that independence is also people being independent of these networks and platforms that we're using.
You've used the word independent a lot. And if I understand you correctly, you said that movements start out as movements, then become businesses, then become rackets. And then said we all must, the central planning of medium.com hath failed us. Therefore, we must be independent. Scott Santens for Libertarian 2024. So anyway, no. All right. So Scott, dude, this was amazing. I absolutely love this. This was this was a lot of fun talking with you, getting to know you a little bit better, and understanding UBI. We understand you got to go here pretty soon and have your meeting up there at the White House. You've been summoned. So anyway, any last things you want to say? First off, tell our audience how they can follow you. All right. On what platforms they can follow you, like, social media. Once again, repeat all of your scottsantens.news stuff, and then we'll let you go, man.
Okay, great. Yeah, so subscribe to me on scottsantens.news to get email alerts to wherever I post and whatever new content is made. Follow me on @ScottSantens on Twitter. That's probably where I'm most at. And also my Patreon is patreon.com/ScottSantens. So you can choose to support me, there as well.
All right, this is awesome. So, Cody, got anything else you want to tell them before we say goodbye?
Just keep up, man. Like I said, we learned about UBI coming from Andrew Yang, but learning about UBI from Andrew Yang, one of the first names started coming up all the time. I started seeing was yours, man. So just keep doing what you do, man. It's really cool.
Yeah, so just choose your spot in Andrew Yang's cabinet. Anyway.
Yeah. I'm not going anywhere.
So we've been talking with Scott Santens. You guys got to check him out. Follow him on social media. Follow him on his website, the whole 9 yards. If you like this video, make sure you click like. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. If you guys want to contribute to our channel, there's a PayPal link in the description below. This is Problem Solving Politics. See you in the next video.